Change. That may be the best word to describe the 2024-25 Duke football team. Tonight, we get an inside look into the Duke football team by none other than the College Huddle's voice of all things Duke, Ben Byrd. Ben is the host of the BullCityCoordinators, and he joins us next on the ACC College Huddle. All right, welcome in tonight to another episode of the ACC College Huddle. I'm your host, Jeff Lowe, and I'm joined tonight by our resident College Huddle Duke representative and host of the BullCityCoordinators, Ben Byrd. How are you doing tonight, Ben?
I'm doing great, Jeff. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be back on here. This is always a lot of fun.
Yeah, no doubt. I think your episode, you were a part of our first ACC Huddle, and that's our most watched episode. We need to have you on weekly. I think
you got to be able to find better guests than me.
I think the story is you need to be hosting the show. I just need to be the guest.
I don't know. We want good content, not terrible content.
Gosh. Well, I don't know about myself, but I know tonight I'm in good hands because we got you on here. So we wanted to just talk a little Duke football. We've been kind of going around the league and talking. I know it's early, but talking football. I know the different schools have had their spring games, and so last season I know Duke was 8-5. But the name for this episode tonight was change, because there's been a lot of turnover and change at Duke. I think there's 10 returning starters, maybe 4 offensive, 6 defensive. You got a new head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, quarterback, just to name a few. Well, to start off, your new head coach, Manny Diaz, who was at Miami at one time. What do you expect him to bring to Duke?
Well, I think he'll bring some experience. He's familiar with the ACC. He won the last game he coached at Miami. I was at. He beat the Blue Devils badly. We'll just use that adjective.
Right.
He's got experience. I think going and spending time at Penn State brings credibility, and that's important. I talked about that in a recent basketball interview I had with former Duke player Robert Brickey, and that credibility can go a long way. Looking at some of his defenses at Miami and Penn State, and it's been a while since I looked at them, but they were complicated, blitz heavy, hide your coverage, hide your scheme defense. Hopefully the guys at Duke are smart enough to run it. You got to think that they are going to be. Right. I'm not going to take a cheap shot at Miami and say something stupid like, if they were smart enough to run it at Miami, they ought to be smart enough to run it at Duke. Oh, wait, I just did. That's just in good fun, guys. Come on.
I knew where you're going.
It's just in good fun. I don't mean anything by it. But I do think he's going to bring some creativity to the defense. He's going to bring some creativity to that process. Offensively, we should see a pretty open system. We should see a lot of gun. We should see a lot of throwing the ball all over the field. I've heard a rumor that the tight ends are going to be utilized. I'll believe it when I see it, but boy, I sure hope that we do. Again, I'm wearing the Ohio Bobcats polo. This is not planned. I don't know why I keep doing it when I do these interviews, but it's just what I have on. It's not some protest thing that I'm making about the current staff. Don't think anything about that. But I think these guys are going to be in great shape. Coach Feely's still there as they don't call it strength and conditioning, but that's what I still have it in my mind as. So it should be an interesting season. I'm not going to get too optimistic, but I'm not going to be too disappointed if it doesn't go well. We talk a little bit more about this later. Duke has lost a lot of key contributors all over the place. It's hard, especially at a place like Duke, who always struggles with depth, to replace 2 guys on your O-line who get drafted and are going to be in the NFL in Graham Barton and Jacob Monk. And then you lose Dwayne Carter, Jamion Franklin. Carter got drafted. Franklin was an undrafted free agent. Just lost a lot of guys. So success is really predicated on how well your lines play. And so that's going to be a challenge. That's going to be a challenge for the Blue Devils. There's just a lot of unknowns. We lost Aeneas Peebles. We lost Jordan Waters. We lost, how am I forgetting his name? I apologize. Wide receiver, war number 5, I believe it was Calhoun. He's gone. You're losing a lot of key contributors. Riley Leonard. It's
right.
There's a lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainties going into this season, but a lot of reason to be optimistic too. And we can talk more about that later.
Now, well, I was going to say, I think I saw you guys had like the crazy enough, like the 134th ranked in the country in returning production from last season. So that's enough to tell you how much y'all lost.
Yeah, the good thing though about it is the running backs have always been good since about 2000. I can't remember what year it was into Cutcliffe's tenure, but since then we've always, third or fourth year into his tenure, we've always had running backs who can produce, and we're going to have running backs who can produce this year. Question is going to be, are we going to have a line that can block for them?
Right.
That's going to be the real question. And I'm not criticizing the guys there. It's just, again, when you lose anchors like that, when you lose key guys, key contributors at a place like Duke that's a developmental program historically, it's just hard to replace. So we'll see what happens, but we've got cogs there. You got Jordan Moore, great receiver. You got Eli Pankel coming back, who the Blue Devils just could not replace last year. They could not find a way to replace him, which was surprising. Not to knock Pankel, but I just thought there was going to be a guy who was going to be able to step in and at least do enough of what he did to be effective. But it just didn't happen. So him coming back and being with Moore, I'm excited about that. And we've got guys who can throw him the ball in Maalik Murphy and also in Grayson Loftus. So there's reasons to be optimistic.
Yeah. So I was going to say, you have so Coach Diaz hired Jonathan Brewer as your offensive coordinator. And I believe he worked with Diaz at Miami as a special offensive assistant or something. I can't recall what his job was. He was at SMU. What kind of offense does he run? I know you were just saying a lot of shotgun or.
Yeah, it's going to be exactly like what SMU did last year. It's going to be, from what I understand, there's going to be a lot of passing. It's going to be a lot of spreading the field. It's going to be a lot of opening it up. I'm not saying it's going to be like what we used to see when Spurrier was there, because Spurrier's offense is unique. But I think the emphasis on throwing the ball will be similar. I also think that it'll be sort of like what we saw early in Cutcliffe's tenure there, where he was trying to throw the ball a lot with Thaddeus Lewis. Mm-hmm. Maalik Murphy's got a cannon, so they should be able to use it, but he's not a runner. He will run if he has to run, but he's not a runner. Loftus is much more of a, if I see something, I'm going to go get it. I'm going to go run, but I do want to throw, but I'm not afraid to run. I'm not saying Murphy's afraid to run. I'm just saying that the thought process of the two quarterbacks is a little different in their approach to it. So as far as what we'll see offensively, look at SMU's tape, and I think we'll see a lot of that. The question is going to be, are the receivers who we have there going to be able to, pass Eli Pankel and pass Jordan Moore? Are they going to be able to step up and contribute, and what can we expect from the tight ends? I mean, you know this as well as I do. It's easy to isolate one guy and to put too much pressure on the other guy. That's when your threes and your other guys in the system have to step up. That's going to be the test for the Blue Devils.
Yeah. Well, so speaking of quarterback, I know many people say quarterback is your most important position on a football team, and you guys had a good one last year, Riley Leonard, and he's moved on to Notre Dame. So you were just talking about, you hit the transfer portal. You got Maalik Murphy from Texas. He did not play much last year, very little, I believe. And SI ranked him as the 14th best QB in the ACC. I think that's pretty much because there's just a lot of unknown there. What are your thoughts on Murphy? And then if he were to struggle early, do you believe he has a short leash?
14th in the conference?
In the conference, which is a little low to me, but that's yeah. And you have there are all sorts of rankings. And so what I was going off of was
no, I'm not reacting to you. I'm reacting.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. That seems really low. I think he played pretty well at Texas last year, right? I mean,
doing a little research on him, I think he struggled a bit in a Kansas State game, I believe. He really didn't get a lot of time either. So, if we're switching places here and I'm the Duke guy, I'm very optimistic. Number one, because he was recruited to play football at Texas.
Right.
And so I'm optimistic. I don't know, I don't know where they get some of these rankings, how these different people rank these quarterbacks, especially somebody like him. He has not really had a lot of time on the field. I'm a Virginia guy, and our guy was ranked next to last. So
that's weird
because your guy's good. I've got high hopes on him. So, I take for what you would, but I don't know. Do you think he's got a short leash, or what are your thoughts or hopes?
I don't think he's got a short leash. I will say your quarterback should be rated higher. He played pretty well last year. That's surprising to me that he would be ranked that low. Maybe some of the guys who work for ESPN are putting that ranking together because they clearly don't watch the product on the field in the ACC. But not to take another cheap shot, but that one was deliberately a cheap shot. That was not a in good fun joke at Miami. I don't think Murphy's going to have a short leash because I don't think you bring in a guy from Texas to sit him, especially in the era of NIL. What I would say, though, is I think this competition between Loftus and Murphy is going to be more intense. And it's going to be more beneficial to them than you would expect because Loftus has a quality about him when you watch him play, and you couldn't really take much from the spring game because I'm sorry, I'm not going to watch 7-on-7 drills. I'm just not going to do it.
Right.
He showed the ability to make throws. He showed the ability to do things. He showed the ability to make plays. Now, he also showed, because he's young, the ability to make mistakes. And I've talked, my good friend Connor O'Neill, who I've had on with the Duke Rivals site, has talked a lot about how he just thinks that there is a future for Loftus at Duke. And when and how it's going to be, I don't know. But what I would say is this. I think Murphy's got to be the front runner going into this season. But if you're Manny Diaz, if you're Brewer, if you're the offensive staff, you feel really good about the two quarterbacks you have. After that, that's where it's a problem. If you're playing three quarterbacks, as we saw last year, you're in trouble anyway.
Right.
But Beelan's just not been able to get healthy. I don't know why that is, and I'm not criticizing him for that. I don't want this to come off as me being critical of him. It's just stating the fact. He's had some issue with his arm, with his shoulder that he's just not been able to overcome. And it's unfortunate because he can really air the ball out if he can throw. But he's just not been able to, and he's just not getting better. So, but if you had those three guys, you'd feel really good about your quarterback room. But 1 and 2, I think the coaching staff's got to be really excited about.
Cool. I was going to say he has one of the standout receivers. You've already mentioned him tonight, Jordan Moore. I believe what I've read on the team, they're calling him as the top returning offensive player to this team. And I think last year he had 8 touchdowns, received for 835 yards. And so you expect he'll probably, hopefully improve from there this year. What are your thoughts on Jordan and anyone else in the receiver room, or even you mentioned tight ends? I think you got a returner, a 5th-year tight end coming back too.
Yeah, Del Mullen decided to come back for another year. That's exciting. I'm going to pronounce his name wrong. I know it starts with an H. I'm sorry. I'm getting it wrong. I apologize. I'll pull up his name. Those two guys are competitive. They're good. And Del Mullen has been there for a long time. And the question's going to be, are we going to be able to get to a point where we see the tight end becoming a regular part of the offense. Jeremiah Hasley, that's the guy I was thinking of.
Okay.
And I don't know. Honestly, the tight end position has been an issue. You know, you had Reeves and you had Deaver back during the 4 bowl game run. But starting in about 2015, 2014, they became less important to the offense and became more gimmicky kind of contributors. And that's what we've seen from the tight ends since that time for about the last 9-10 years. So we need to find ways to get them more involved. I mean, Noah Gray has won 2 Super Bowls, I think caught passes in both of them. Mm-hmm. And he's, you see him when he gets opportunities behind, a pretty good guy. I don't know.
Right.
They say he's pretty good. I don't know.
Right.
Whatever. Right. And again, that's obviously a joke because he was on that Bearcats team in 2012 that beat the Blue Devils in the Belk Bowl, which I was at. Yeah, he's really good. Kelsey's really, really good. But you see Noah Gray, you see his ability and you see his talent. What did he do when he was at Duke in the red zone his last year? No, I mean, we never got him the ball. We never took steps to get him the ball. I mean, that's offensive coaching staff malpractice. So the question for me is, are we going to do it this year? Are we actually going to find ways to make it happen? Or are we going to see more of what we had seen from other staffs of coaching malpractice? Because that's what happened with Noah Gray. But, man, if we start giving those guys opportunities, I'm going to be real, real excited.
And tight end is your quarterback's best friend. So,
well, and Eli Pankel too. I think this is his 6th year. It'll be his 6th year if he comes back and he's healthy and he's effective. A wide receiver, as fast as he was over the top in 1 year with Coach Feely. I mean, he added speed and explosiveness that I don't think any of us thought we would see from him. He was a downfield guy, and you got him with Jordan Moore. I mean, the potential is there. The potential is really, really there. Question is the O-line going to be good enough to make it happen? And nobody knows that today.
Right. And funny you say that. That was my next question for you. And I know you've already mentioned you guys had 2 offensive linemen selected in the draft this past year, including Graham Barton, who was a first-round pick of the Buccaneers. And I think the O-line, in my notes say that's the most questions is your O-line. Any thoughts on how it may look or how the rotation may shake out? And what's the depth look like?
Honestly, I think a guy who's going to be a real big contributor is Bruno Fina, if I'm pronouncing that right, who came in from UCLA, future Big Ten powerhouse maybe. We'll see. That's going to be he's going to be a big contributor. If I recall correctly, he's the left tackle. If he's not, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. But it'll be interesting to see what guys like Brian Parker can do. And what Pickett can do. But look, I mean, there's just a lot of uncertainty. Monk and Barton were both hurt last year at times, and you saw how it affected the team. So we could see more of that, but it's not a particularly deep bunch or an experienced bunch at O-line. So what you could see is games 1 through 4, they're finding their way, but by games 7 through 9, they've really got it figured out. And 10 through 12, maybe they play their best.
Right.
That stuff happens, right? We see that happens with O-lines because it takes them time to gel, to get to know each other. It's kind of like you're being in a relationship, and you're kind of, I don't want to say figuring out how not to step on landmines, but you get the point that I'm making. You got to find a way to walk. So that's going to be the biggest question mark, I think, for everybody coming into this season is how is the O-line going to hold up?
Right.
And I think UVA has some similar issues with depth that the Blue Devils have, although I don't think it's as bad as what the Blue Devils deal with because the 2 big football programs in Virginia historically have been Virginia Tech and UVA. There's a lot more competition now.
Right.
But at a place like Duke, it's problematic because you've got NC State, you got North Carolina, and then you're dealing with Wake and ECU and App State, and Duke's kind of fallen in historically to an afterthought. So depth is always a huge issue for the Blue Devils.
Duke's always known as that basketball school. I can remember I've been to multiple games at Duke in football and sitting in the stands, and and times have changed since what I'm about to say, because Virginia, you know, they were late 80s, early 90s. Duke football was good, and they had a bad stretch. And I go to the game, you hear the Duke students say, "Just wait till basketball." And I knew that was very true.
A generous statement for what we went through in the mid 90s through to the mid 2000s. That's a generous assessment of it.
Yeah. And now the tide is turning. Duke has been rolling, and you know, we've had our struggles for sure. But so another notable change, you guys hired, or Coach Diaz hired Jonathan Patke as the defensive coordinator. I know he's also worked with Coach Diaz and was at Texas State last season. I know you said Diaz is probably going to be complex defense, bring in a lot of blitzes. Is that kind of what you're expecting out of Coach Patke?
Well, I think I wouldn't be surprised if there's some scheme confusion to kind of confuse the quarterbacks. And honestly, they'll get away with a lot of stuff in year one that maybe they won't get away with in year two. When you rely on heavy blitzing, Duke historically has not had that dominant linebacker who can just blow somebody up, right? But Trey Freeman's really good. He's a very good linebacker, and you've got Chandler Rivers in the secondary. And particularly in college, and it's true in the pros too, if you have a good cornerback, you can take out parts of the field. So what does that mean? Chandler Rivers can elevate that secondary and help that defense, right? Trey Freeman can do some of the same things. I think there's just going to be a lot of same thing with the offensive line. There's going to be a lot of question marks until people get on the field and we start to see it, how it plays out. Why we're playing Carolina so early, again, I don't know. I'm not in charge of the schedule, right? But I think that the defense will find a way to figure itself out, because Elko was a defensive guy when he was there, and he got a lot of production out of it. Diaz is a defensive guy who's put up really good numbers, so I don't expect too much in the way of drop-off, but I also don't expect there to be necessarily the same level of dominance on that line that we had last year, because you have two guys going into the NFL. I know one's an undrafted free agent, but then another is going to Virginia Tech. And I don't remember what level of all ACC and ESPs was, but he was like the MVP of the Tech spring game. I mean, that's a big pickup, right?
Right.
So there's going to be a drop-off, but I think that Diaz and his coaching staff are going to be good enough to find ways to compensate it, because you've got enough parts still there that you can be creative and smart and find ways to keep the team competitive.
Right. You kind of hit on a little bit of my next question. Was I know you guys are bringing back, I believe, 6 returning starters on the defense, and Chandler Rivers was my next question. I know everything I've read, he's probably the team's best NFL prospect. And my question for you was, I was going to ask you your thoughts on Chandler Rivers, which you kind of already told me. And then was there anybody else, you've kind of answered this one, anybody else on the defensive side that you believe will make a huge impact?
I think Trey Freeman, like I'd mentioned, but also Vincent Anthony on the defensive line. You know, he has played well, and he's a good player. I'll be interested to see what we get from the linebackers, what we can see maybe from Ryan Smith. He's a graduate. I can't remember if he's year 4 or year 5, because I'm assuming it's year 5, but it's hard to keep up with everything.
Right.
There are guys there. Wesley Williams, I think, will play well. He's a 6'3" defensive end from Gainesville in our state. He should be able to make some plays and do a good job. The question I think that we're all going to have, though, is what's the rotation going to be? How are these guys going to come in and play? And how long is it going to take them to gel in this new system? And maybe they come out through after spring and summer and they get hot the first 4 games.
Right.
We'll see.
Right.
But those are the guys that I would look at to expect big contributions from.
So getting a new head coach usually leads to a large amount of players entering the portal. And you guys lost a lot, like we've already said, but also it leads to getting a lot of new players. Other than Maalik Murphy, are there any other new additions that we should be on the lookout to make a big impact?
Yeah, I think Bruno Fina, who we mentioned earlier on the O-line, I'll be interested to see what Alex Howard can do, who flipped from A&M to come to Duke. And there was a cornerback we picked up from Rice, who I think might be able to make some plays. But we'll see. We also picked up a Northwestern offensive tackle. I mean, there's guys there, but again, we're not 100% sure. And we got a guy from Liberty on the D-line, Charles. I will be interested to see how those guys do, along with a wide receiver from Old Dominion and Harvey.
Yep.
But again, we picked up some other guys, some big brain guys, a linebacker and a tackle from Princeton and Cornell, respectively. And then we got another lineman who I think came in from Lafayette, which we played Lafayette last year. We also picked up an O-lineman from Penn, another big brain guy, and a lineman from Holy Cross. But the guy from Lafayette who came over, that is a school that runs the ball really, really, really well. We played them last year, and they played us well, and they ran the ball. So we'll see. We'll see how that works out. You always wonder about moving from one level to another, but we'll see. Right. There's reasons for optimism. There's reasons for hope, but we've just got to see how all this gels, because there's just so much. There's just so much unknown.
Right, and that's what it is. It's so early in the process until you see these guys on the field, and that's what we're doing here tonight is the way too early tour of the Duke team. And I want to bring this one up. This is y'all's schedule for this coming year. Duke was I've seen them a 5.5. I've seen them a 6.5 over under. But you're opening with Elon, so you should be able to get off to a good start and get some confidence going. What's your thoughts on this schedule? I mean, it's a tough schedule.
Right. We did not win the schedule lottery this year, but I think Elon, UConn, Middle Tennessee are wins. Northwestern will be tough. North Carolina, I don't know what to expect from the Tar Heels. And we go through them one by one. I think somewhere in the 5 to 7 win range is what you'd expect. So let's say they go 3-1 in their first 4. Their next 4, maybe they go 2-2 or 1-3. Georgia Tech's going to be tough. Florida State's going to be tough. SMU is going to be interesting. It's going to be a very interesting team to watch. So let's say they go 1-3 or 2-2. That gets you to 4 or 5 wins. Miami, NC State, Virginia Tech, and Wake. You're thinking either 1-3 or 2-2 there, right? So you're thinking 5 to 7 wins.
Right. You're fighting for a bowl game this year.
Yeah, I think so. And honestly, even if they get 5 wins, if they get to 5 wins, but they play well with that schedule, I don't think that's a loss. If they get to 6 or 7 wins, I think that's honestly better than last year.
Right.
Because last year it got ruined with all the injuries, right? And coaching decisions that played into what happened at the end of the Notre Dame game. But you got to think Wake Forest is a winnable game.
Yes.
You could upset Miami, and you could beat SMU. So that could be 3. That could get you to 6, even if you lose to North Carolina, Georgia Tech, and Florida State. And this year could be the year that we finally beat Carolina, because there's a lot of uncertainties with that program, and we're catching them early.
Yeah, and you guys have a lot of storyline type games too. North Carolina's a rival. Georgia Tech, your defensive coordinator is at Georgia Tech now, right?
Yeah, the old defensive coordinator went down there. And honestly, Georgia Tech's a good team.
Georgia Tech is one of those teams, I think they're a dangerous team. I think their over-under was a little low. considering you got a quarterback like Haynes King who can move around like he can, that's always a wild card when you play a game. I'm always nervous when we play teams like that.
And their coach, I mean, you saw that game against Georgia was a competitive game.
Yep.
They were hanging around for a long time, and they played Georgia better than a lot of teams played them. So I'm just saying that guy was a coach. What's his last name?
I don't know
Key.
why.
Coach Key.
Yep.
He knows what he's doing, so you cannot overlook the Yellow Jackets.
Right.
And Florida State has a ton of new transfer guys coming in.
Yep.
And so maybe they don't gel like they did last year.
Right. No, yeah. And then, it's for Florida State, what's DJ Ukulele going to be? Is he going to be Clemson DJ Ukulele or, Oregon or you just don't know. I've never been high on him, but we'll see. And then you got SMU, and that's another game for you where your offensive coordinator has come over to Duke to play SMU.
And if I recall correctly, SMU's old head coach or current head coach used to work under Manny Diaz.
Oh, okay.
I believe I'm going to check that while we're on the phone, or while we're doing this recording. But there's connections there, and honestly, I think that team is that SMU team is going to be very, very exciting to watch, and could give people a lot of problems.
Yeah, SMU, I think their over-under that we had them at they were up there, 7.5. So, and then, the question for SMU too is, this is their first season in a Power 5 conference. How are they going to respond? They weren't gifted the best opening ACC game. They're playing Florida State in Florida State, I believe, for their first. I don't. Maybe it's at SMU. I don't recall, but that's a tough way to get started in the ACC.
Yeah, and I pulled up Coach Lashley's Wikipedia bio. He did overlap with Diaz at Miami.
Okay.
And there's a lot there that could make that game interesting. I think maybe that's the best way to do it. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if SMU shocked some teams this year and got wins against a team like the Blue Devils. I mean, looking at their schedule, they've got Nevada, Houston Christian, BYU, TCU, Florida State, Louisville, Stanford, Duke, Pitt, BC, Virginia. Not to knock you guys, Cal, but they close out on 3 games. You'd think they could go 2-1.
Right. And
depending on what Pitt does, they could beat Pitt. You could pick up a win against Stanford if they do well to start the season.
Yeah. And Stanford, Stanford's a 3.5 over under. They're not high expectations on them.
Hey, ACC legend John Elway.
Right. That's right. Well, then after you play SMU, then Diaz gets to go back to his old stomping grounds in Miami, in that hostile Miami environment.
The Sevens fans are going to be making a lot of noise.
You'll be able, I don't want to take a shot at the fans there. I guess we're the ACC Huddle, so I'm not taking a shot at Miami fans, but it's just the home field environment is just tough. It's just tough. Yeah. And you'll be able to hear what individuals are saying. So anyway, I wish Miami the best. But Diaz will go back to Miami, and then at NC State's a tough game. And
absolutely.
As a Virginia fan, I hate this. We've been saying this all along, and I hate to say this. Virginia Tech is, for me, is a dark horse to have a shot at winning the ACC title. Their schedule is very friendly, and they get to play. I just want to show this one now since I'm bringing them up. They get Clemson. I believe they get Clemson at home towards the end of the season. Vanderbilt, Marshall. I said that ODU could be that's a scary game for them. They haven't beat ODU at ODU, but Rutgers at Miami, at Stanford, you think that's a win. Boston College at home.
That's a win.
Georgia Tech at home could be tough, but it's at home. Syracuse could be tough, but I expect them to win. Clemson at home that's probably going to be a Saturday night football game at Lane Stadium. They travel to Duke, and then we can't beat them for nothing in the world. So that's 7.5. I feel like that's like a sure bet, but
I'd take the over because honestly, I think they beat. Can you bring that one back up?
Yep.
I mean, looking at it, I think they beat Vandy, Marshall, Old Dominion, and Rutgers. They start out 4-0, and I think they beat Miami.
I do too.
I think they beat Stanford.
Yep.
I think they beat Boston College. Worst case scenario, you got to be thinking they come out of there 6-1.
Yep.
And then between Georgia Tech, Syracuse, and Clemson, they probably go 2-1. That gets you to 8, and then Duke and Virginia. I mean, they got to be favored to get to 9 wins, if not close out with 2 wins to end the season.
Yeah. Hey, look, I pull this is the ACC Huddle, but it hurts my heart. I love the guys, the Boundary Corner podcast, Virginia Tech. We're not supposed to get along, but we get along till football season starts. But if I'm a Tech fan, I'm really excited for the season. So, Ben. So I really appreciate you coming on here tonight and joining to talk about the Duke football team. I know we're way early and we're doing early predictions, but we'll look forward to getting you back on, hopefully before the season a couple times and during the season. And we'll see what Duke has. Hopefully we'll know a little bit more about Duke football when they actually get on the field and get to see what they got. But it's definitely been a pleasure to have you on tonight. Can you tell folks where they can find you at and where your content is?
Sure. So pretty much all the socials, you'll find me at Duke FB Coverage. You can check out our website, BullCityCoordinators.com. And we have 2 podcasts that we run. One is the Bull City Coordinators podcast, which is part of the College Huddle Network. It's the Bull City Coordinators Duke Football Coverage podcast. We will cross over, do a little bit of basketball talk now and again. We just had, as I mentioned, an episode with Robert Brickey, who played at Duke in the early Coach K days, right about when the dynasty started under him. And we also have a podcast about classical antiquity topics, primarily ancient Greece, ancient Rome. That podcast is called the Classical Antiquity Side Quest. You can follow that on Twitter at AntiquityPod. But I cross-promote at all the Duke FB coverage stuff for that as well. And we've got 2 episodes of that in the can, but not completely edited yet. So one is going to be about Emperor Augustus, and the other is actually going to be about sports in ancient Greece, which I think I will cross-post on both podcasts because there is some overlap with sports. One of the guests who talked about sports in ancient Greece, one of the 2 guests, the one who talked about sports in ancient Greece, she is a college football official and a college basketball official.
Oh, nice.
And she has actually told me, you'll find out she actually has been to a couple of Bobcat games as a ref. And so that was interesting to talk about that element of it. And that's part of why I'd reached out to her and why I wanted to have her come on the podcast. And it was nice that she was able to come on.
Nice. Yeah. And then hopefully we'll get you on at some point and talk a little basketball. Duke's got a little bit going on.
Yeah. I think, that the thing that I've learned about the basketball is you just got to be with the way that they've changed over. Like the portal's not that big of a deal for Duke as it has been for other schools because for the last 10, 12 years, Duke's been doing nothing but one and dones. So we're used to the roster turnover, but the problem with the roster turnover is it's hard to be good every year because you don't have UVA, when they won the championship, they'd had those guys come through the program, right? Right. So it's just a little bit of a different application of what we've seen. But I don't let myself get too excited about the upcoming season, but I'm looking forward to it. We'll say
you should be optimistic. We were just happy to get TJ Power, the guy who scored 2 points a game for y'all, but we're excited to get him. He just couldn't find his spot with you guys last year.
Yeah, I like TJ a lot. He's a good shooter. He worked hard, and you saw some of that in some of the social media stuff they put out there, and he was near things that were happening. He wasn't always necessarily making things happen, but he was near things. The one thing, though, that I would be a little bit worried about if I were Power going to UVA is if your defense wasn't good enough at Duke, which was kind of the knock on him. But again, he's a freshman.
Right.
If your defense wasn't good enough at Duke, it's probably not going to be good enough at UVA unless Bennett stops being Tony Bennett. So that was the only thing about Power and Stewart both transferring did surprise me.
Right.
I can understand why Power thought I need to do this so I can get some minutes. Mm-hmm. But I hope it works out for him because I thought he played hard and I thought he represented Duke well and I thought he did all the things. So I hope it works out. If I'm in your shoes, putting myself in your shoes, I'm saying to myself, boy, I hope he can find that extra half step on defense.
Right. Yeah, we sure hope so. And Bennett recruited him out of high school. We were one of the final couple. And unfortunately, usually when we're one of the final couple and Duke's on the other side or Kentucky or North Carolina, we're always the bridesmaid, never the bride. So, but I think he looked at that, all your incoming freshmen, and looked at that roster and saw the writing on the wall. And he's like, Virginia's not so bad after all. So.
Yeah, and I think I can understand why he transferred, and I'm not saying he shouldn't have transferred or anything like that.
No, I got you.
The thing that, again, if I'm a UVA guy, I would be saying, whew, if your defense wasn't good enough at Duke, is it going to be good enough for Tony Bennett?
Right. Well, that'll be to be determined. So.
Right.
We'll see. But, so, Ben, well, thanks for joining us tonight. And we look forward to having you on here for some future episodes. And I hope you have a great evening.
Hey, I'm glad to come on. Always glad to do it. And look forward to doing more of these. Thanks a lot for having me on.
Thank you. That was Ben Byrd joining us tonight from the Bull City Coordinators, and appreciate him joining us. So last items for the night, the ACC has won another national title this past Monday as Notre Dame took down former ACC team Maryland in the lacrosse national title game. And also we are recording this on Thursday night, so no results for the episode, but college baseball started today, Friday, at noon in most regionals. Shout out to the ACC, 5 regional hosts to include Florida State, UNC, Clemson, NC State, and Virginia. Also, Wake Forest, Duke, and Georgia Tech are in the tournament as well. And I didn't mention it to Ben to give him a little shout out, but shout out to Duke for winning the ACC tournament this past Sunday against FSU. So lots of great things coming up here within the ACC. That's going to wrap up our show for tonight. I would like to thank you for tuning in to the ACC College Huddle. Please check us out on YouTube at the College Huddle Podcast. Also, check out thecollegehuddle.com for podcasts and articles about all of your favorite ACC schools and other conferences as well. You can find me and the rest of my co-hosts also on the Cavalier Connection podcast. Check us out on YouTube at the Cavalier Connection podcast or on X at Talk UVA Sports. We've also hit Instagram, and our you can hit us at _Cavalier_connection_ I believe that's all there. So other than that, I'd like to thank you for tuning in tonight. We'll see you guys next Friday.